All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of our deep dive and lore analysis from Fellowship of Fans. Today we're tackling episode 4, and we have a couple regulars back today, as well as a special guest. Why don't we start with him? We've got James Tauber from the Digital Tolkien Project. James, please say hi.
Hello, everyone.
We've got Strider back as always.
Hi, it's lovely to be here.
We've got V. We've got V.
Hello, everyone. Glad to be back.
And myself. And before we get going, James, I'd love if you could let our audience know a little bit about what you do and the work that you're working on currently as far as Tolkien, so that they can become a little more familiar with you.
Absolutely. So I trained as a linguist, and the main thing that I do in my day job is develop software for helping people to better understand languages and text. I do a lot of stuff with ancient Greek and Old English and stuff like that. But about 6 years ago, I realized that a lot of the techniques that I use for studying those kinds of texts would work really well for the texts of Tolkien because of the richness of the material. They really lend themselves to that kind of deep dive that makes the best use of sort of linguistic and computational analysis. So that's what led to the Digital Tolkien Project. And so we do a lot of different things to basically help better understand the text and get access to the text. So you could see if you're looking at the screen at the moment, we've developed citation systems for accessing, referencing the text, the ability to search across a range of texts. We're doing a lot of analysis of the use of particular words in the Tolkien glossary. We've been doing a bunch of stuff with the Rings of Power, including basically bringing in all of the subtitles to do analysis of how many words different characters are speaking, what locations, how much time's being spent in each location, and so on. With the Tolkien collected poems books coming out in 9 days now, there's a lot of stuff that we're doing with the poetry, and just a lot of trying to apply the latest techniques in corpus linguistics and digital humanities to the texts of Tolkien that we all love so much.
It's really fantastic. Everybody go check it out. It's really cool stuff. We'll jump right into the episode, but let me say first, apologies for being vertical today. I'm calling in today from a hostel in Krakow, and apparently iPhones has limitations with what it can do with our software that we're using. If there are any technical difficulties, then our good friend Strider should probably take over. But hopefully that won't happen. In the meanwhile, let's get going. This episode, I think, seems to be among maybe the most controversial so far in terms of people who either seem to love it or not be such big fans of it. And so just to sort of kick it out the gate, I want to get a sense of what you guys think in terms of sort of the fidelity to Tolkien of this episode. And I felt, for me personally, that in some respects, it had some really interesting sort of nuggets, and then places where it seemed to really take its own turn. And I'd love to get your sense of the overall impression in that regard. Why don't we start with you, James?
Sure. So I think there are a lot of really interesting references to stuff here, as you mentioned, but it felt a little to me like it was trying to just check off a bunch of boxes. It was almost like, let's take all the stuff that we missed out from the Peter Jackson movies and put it here. And I felt like it lacked a lot of coherence. There are some weird things that we'll get into, like why Tom Bombadil is where he is and why he's the way he is. But there were some really nice moments as well that I'm sure I'll get to. And there are a lot of things that even if they were altered in some way from perhaps what we would expect from the books, it was still nice to see. So we'll get into all that, I'm sure.
Yeah, sure. How about you, Strider? What was your take overall on that front?
So for me, I feel like this is one of those, it's one of those middle chapters that starts nowhere and leads nowhere specific, because it's just like the middle, it's like the 45th minute of a 2-hour movie. So it's kind of hard to like talk about it in a way, like in terms of like coherence to the story. I think it's very interesting that there's a lot of different opinions about this episode, which is always fun to talk about. I actually liked it quite a lot. I mean, I think maybe I just was kind of ready for some random kind of episode where there's just like a bunch of disconnected things going on, just because it's like in the middle of the season. But I can definitely see the reasons why some people don't like it. I personally really enjoyed it. I think it had some really good stuff. Yeah, some good, some bad. For me, it was mostly good. It was just a lot of fun little things that I kind of missed. I mainly the sense of adventure. This is the episode, perhaps of all the shows so far, season 1 and season 2. This is the one that maybe gave that to me the most. So overall, I quite liked it. But I'm really interested. I'm looking forward to diving in like into the specifics and like seeing why everybody thinks the way they do.
V, what about you? Let's just go around the horn with this one.
So I liked the episode quite a lot. Wouldn't say it's my favorite of the season, but I anticipated a lot of stuff, and I'm glad like this happened. It sort of reminds those filler episodes that they used to do when we had 24 episode seasons, that they randomly had a Christmas episode or like Easter episode or something like that. So this was like the side quest episode for this type of series, and it was quite interesting to have a lot of like remarks. I like how they tried to basically check off the boxes, as James said, but at the same time sort of give us why they did that. Like they had an explanation of why Tom Bombadil was there, of why the Barrow Whites sort of were there. So it's quite interesting that they did that, in my opinion. So yeah, quite excited for the conversation ahead.
Well, as far as these sort of like interesting aspects that we saw that, you know, we maybe didn't get as much of in the Peter Jackson, though I think we got a little bit of this one. But I kind of want to start with the line that Arondir throws to us, that there are nameless things in the deeps of this world. Strata, let's start with you on this. Do you think that, you know, obviously they're trying to give us a sense of seeing more of these. Do you think that they did a good job with sort of the creation of these characters, or you know, or was it kind of going off the rails as far as maybe what one would maybe expect to see in a Tolkien adaptation?
So, for example, I would say like I like that we had this random creature show up, because fair enough, like who knows? You know, we Tolkien didn't write the complete encyclopedia of all the fantastical non-humanoid creatures in his world. So to meet something like this, like yeah, but why not? But I feel like the line specifically was too much. That they had quite a few of those in the 12 episodes so far. It's like they don't always land. Sometimes having like a direct callback to specifically the movies, I feel like most people connected with the movies, it works, but often it doesn't, and I feel like they might be slightly overdoing it. Maybe even more than slightly at times. And I feel like this was one of those days like, did you really have to say it like that? Like, can it just be like a random thing that we saw, you know? It's like we are quite on the surface, quite away from Misty Mountains, which is where the original phrase is in reference to. So it's like, I'm not sure. I didn't like it, and I think a lot of people were. That's probably one of the things that everybody was like, that was too much. So I liked the adventure more or less, but the line specifically was too much.
What do you? I always kind of try to think of this in the context of like what we do know about the Tolkien verse, you know, the Legendarium, you know, like there, the different class, you know, we have Maiar and Valar, and then, you know, and the different races, of course. So with the nameless things, I've always been kind of curious. Are they Maiar, or are they of, you know, did Eru give them the flame imperishable? What do you think, James? Like, where do these nameless things sort of fit in sort of that categorization?
Yeah, I mean that's a question that we don't have a definite answer to. I certainly felt it was weird using that line in the context of this particular creature, not least of which, as Strider said, because it was near the surface. It wasn't very deep at all. So it was a strange thing to use it for. There are some, we're going to get to a line right at the very end that I was quite happy to see them reuse in the show, but this was an example where I thought it didn't really land particularly well. In terms of what the nameless creatures are, they, as Strider said, that comment was made in the context of the Misty Mountains, and we obviously have the Balrog there. The extent to which it applies to other creatures, I mean, we know that there were various creatures left over from the first age. The Balrog being one, the spiders being another. Ungolion's descendants, Shelob, and so on. So it certainly, I think that the term suggests that sort of thing, right? These first age creatures, possibly of Morgoth's doing, that managed to escape the destruction after at the end of the first age, and they're hiding very, very deep. I don't know that we really can say much more about it than that. I mean, even that's sort of speculation. I'm not convinced that this is the sort of thing necessarily that Tolkien had in mind. But there we go. There we've got baby Shelob. But yeah, I don't know if we can say much more about the nameless things than that.
Real quick, just so I don't forget later, what's the line that you were looking forward to getting to? I want to get it now. Make sure we come back.
Adar's greeting to Galadriel. Okay.
All right. Okay. So we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that. And meanwhile, V, what do you think? On the Bear McCreary's track, I think calls it Shelob, right? But to me, it felt much more like sort of the spiders that we get in the Misty Mountains in The Hobbit. What was your take on these? First of all, what did you think of the scene with the spiders and the way that was all presented? What did you think of that that whole element with Isildur and all that? And then what do you think that they are?
Yeah, so probably I'm the only one that hasn't caught the nameless things reference. Actually, I'm not sure if it's because I'm Greek, so a lot of the things are translated directly to Greek. When I read Tolkien, especially, I haven't really read in English apart from the Silmarillion, and the same goes with the Peter Jackson's movies because I always have the subtitles in Greek. So sometimes I miss those sort of references. So for me, I didn't understand anything about it. I just saw it becoming a meme on Twitter, and I was like, should I know about something in here? Anyways, so in general, we knew that Shelob was coming due to the lakes and stuff like that, and the law. I don't like spiders, so Shelob for me is always like this interesting character that I hate, because like I couldn't ever imagine being in the presence of it. No. But overall, like, the thing I liked was the bond that Isildur and Beric have in these scenes in general is so strong. Like, it truly shows how much Númenórean is bonded with the horses, because he really went back for Beric like 2 times basically, and Beric went to search for him and he didn't return to Númenor. So that's one thing that I'm taking away from the scenes. The other thing is that Isildur is extremely lucky that Tarandir was there to like save him, and I like when fantasy movies and series in general, stories do that, because a lot of the magical and mystical thing that we like is how much coincidences play part in developing the plot in fantasy settings. So again, it really plays into it. So those were my main takeaways from this, not the creatures so much. Like, again, trying to block shit up from my screen, and like that giant worm, I didn't really understand its place, like exactly what happened with Arondir and Isildur going down there with it. But yeah, I know, like, I want to visit Australia, but I'm getting used to it. I'm going over it. But yeah, now that Australia is mentioned, this kind of worm could live there. So yeah, that's my whole takeaway of it.
Really quick, I'm not sure if I misspoke. Perhaps Otaku said in the comments that I think he meant the spiders Thorn and company encountered in Mirkwood. If I said anything else, yes, that's exactly the one I meant to say. And apologies if so.
Yeah, I think you mentioned Misty Mountains. That's why, but it's close.
Yeah. I meant
right after
yeah.
Misty Mountains.
Mirkwood
so,
was what was in my head, and an adjacent location came out.
It's in the neighborhood.
I was just going to say about this whole worm thing. I think my biggest problem with it was that it really didn't have much of a role in the story. Like, I don't know that we would have lost anything if it didn't happen. I think the only role it plays in the story is maybe making Estrid a little more interesting, and that she made that decision to save them rather than escape. That's about it. I don't know, other than just having a cool random monster to show, that it really served much purpose other than that.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I'm gonna jump to something right there. Let me just say about the spiders. I didn't mind them having the spiders. Like, throw in some good spiders in a Tolkien thing. Why not? What I didn't like was just the way it was presented, where, like, Isildur awakes and there's no spiders, and then they start dropping now that he's woken up. Like, it just felt very I was drawn to the unrealistic aspect of that. Maybe that's me being picky, but I just thought that the way that unfolded was a little clunky.
It still felt like a lot of the things in this episode too, as well, that it was just put in there just so we can check the box. I mean, it is kind of cool. Like, if you said to me, you're going to get to see, Cirith Ungol earlier on, and Shelob when she was younger, that sounds cool. Yeah. But is it necessary for the story they're telling beyond simply a box to check off? I'm not so sure.
I mean, it kind of makes sense with Isildur being lost basically in the Southlands, which is now Mordor. So him escaping from that route, personally, it just fits to the narrative with fantasy stories of, like, they always coincidentally bump into stuff that are gonna happen later or had happened before. So it's this sort of callback that always happens in those kind of stories. At least that's how I see it. I expected, as soon as they announced Shelob and with Isildur being lost there, that basically they're gonna call back, or not exactly call back because we know the books, but for them it's like a prequel. So Isildur was there before anyone else was there, before Gollum, before the Hobbits, Frodo and Sam, anyone. So yeah.
Well, I want to ask one more thing about sort of this aspect of things, then we'll move on so we don't have another 2-hour episode like last time. But
why not?
Yeah, well, to be fair, last time we were covering 3 episodes, so there was that. But with Estrid and her making that decision, I like what you're saying, James, about how it makes her character more interesting, and I totally agree. What do you guys think of the sort of budding romance aspect of what they're trying to drive here between those two? Do you ship it? Does it have room, do you think? Like, is it something that you like that they're playing with, or would you wish they'd just wrap that up and move on? Strider, what do you think?
I think, well, she's cute, he's handsome, why not, on the surface level, sure. But I think, I mean, we are bound to see Isildur meet the love of his life, get married, I think he has 4 sons or even 5. Like, it has to happen during the show. We need to see who takes over the kingdoms after he passes away. So it has to happen at some point. So I'm not sure what's going on with this particular storyline, who she is as a character, because she is an original character. I don't know. I'm not sure. Sure where it's going. At the moment, I'm curious. I guess I don't have any particular opinions because it's like an interesting choice. The one thing that's very interesting to me also is I'm not a musically literate person, so I might butcher this thing I'm going to say now. But I think people should understand. So there's I saw something that Bear McCreary talked about on Twitter. Someone caught this thing, and then he responded and confirmed that it is the case. Astrid has a theme, and apparently all the good guys have some kind of like a rise of some kind in their themes, while Sauron doesn't, and Astrid doesn't as well, which implies some kind of evil thing going on. So now I'm just curious to see the development of this. Like, is this just a reference to her being one of these people, or is there something bad coming down the line? So that's kind of I'm kind of particularly curious about this aspect of it. But yeah, it's like a little fun fact that I saw on Twitter. Thanks to
I
Bear.
like. Thank you for teasing that. Thank you for teasing that for us and the viewers. Now we'll know what to look out for there. Kyle, by the way, is doing a fantastic job with our BTS today. Everybody give a round of applause for Kyle. Thank him in the comments. Kyle, there's a comment from Otaku a little while back. I'm not sure how the elves have lore about the whites, blah, blah, blah. Can you pin that? I want to come back to that in a little bit, but just save it to bring it back up in a little bit. I want to go to something else first, but I want that on hand. If you can do that, you're awesome. Thank you. In the meanwhile, I want to go to Elrond and Galadriel and their team. This is how we're going to come back around to the Bear Whites. But one thing I've noticed that we've seen over the first 3 or 4 episodes is this sort of relational dynamic between the two of them, which is sort of, I guess, contrary to what we've seen before. Well, I guess before this, it's even contrary to what we saw in season 1, right? And what I mean by that is we really see this Elrond who doesn't listen to Galadriel, like really takes no heed of her warnings or advice. And V, I want to hear what your thoughts on that are. Do you like the way they're playing with that, or I know you're a huge Elrond fan. How do you feel about this dynamic?
So it's quite interesting that they're still pushing it on. That Elrond doesn't really like the rings. One thing that I saw that really explains it well, if we remember Elrond's past, he basically lost his parents to Dúrley, to the Silmarillions. So he knows very well what powerful Dúrley can do to people, because his father sailed to the west, basically with one of the Silmarils. His mother fell from a cliff and became a bird to escape like the Fëanorians and stuff like that, and he lost his then found family of like the Fëanorians, Fëanor sons, because they, I didn't want to butcher the names, so he lost them to the basically the curse of Fëanor, but like the oath that they took to find again the Silmarils. So we got to remember that he comes back from that, and so having all this knowledge of the lore and how it impacted it doesn't really help him to trust the rings. And I think it will be really interesting to then see him become a ring bearer, because he gets Gil-galad's ring, and also according to the lore, he actually gets it very soon after the sack of Erengion, when he establishes Rivendell. During like the council meeting that they have with Gil-galad there, that's when he gets it's Vilya, or Vilya is Gil-galad's ring. That's when he gets Vilya from Gil-galad. He doesn't get it like in the last Alliance Sins of Fire. He probably gets it at the end of season 2 or even the beginning of season 3, if they chose to follow that. So it's really interesting that they chose to keep him that headstrong and going that much against Galadriel, but I think he's getting so aggressive because also he's really close with Galadriel and they're very good friends. So he tries to basically show her and make her understand why he doesn't want her to have the ring and like use it. And I don't know if he has any hint of knowledge about how much the usage of the ring could affect you in the future, but who knows? Sometimes they might be pushing it a bit with how much he advises her. Like, we have to remember Galadriel is way older than him, with much more experience, and she's one of the elves that was born in Valinor as well. So it's quite interesting how they've chosen to go about it. I personally don't have a problem with it, but I understand why some people like have been teasing Edward about that. But he's as stubborn as a dwarf at this point. He's a dwarf friend, so it makes sense. Yeah.
What do you think, James?
I think V's absolutely.
And let me follow up with that. What do you? Oh, go ahead. Actually, go ahead. Run on with it.
I think V's absolutely right that we've got to take into account Elrond's past and what he saw happen with the Silmarils. So I think he's extremely sensitive to any kind of obsession over an object, right? This is, I think, what's really driving his problems with the ring. I mean, it's the three. It's odd though, because of course, you know, they've changed the order of the creation of the rings of power. And so some of the concerns around the three don't necessarily make sense in terms of the books, just because of the ordering in which they were made. But I do think, as V said, that a lot of it's got to be that Elrond has just seen the impact of an obsession about objects. He's seen what it did to his family and his entire race, essentially. And I think that's where that concern is coming from. One of the questions I have is he right to have the concerns, right? Who's right in all this? And this sort of came up with Círdan's shift in point of view in previous episodes. You know, Círdan initially was sort of on one side, but then Círdan came round to the benefits of the rings. And so Elrond is now in this minority position in terms of whether they should use the rings or not. I think it remains to be seen whether he's in the right or if he's in the wrong on that particular point.
Strider, what do you think about that?
I mean, I think someone has to be the one that challenges this whole idea, because, you know, okay, we know, okay, Sauron took part in this in some way. We should be extremely careful how we do this. So I understand his position completely. I think they did a pretty solid job of setting up this suspicious side through him, because it is an important discussion to have. And I think maybe because of the short runtime, we kind of see the elves accept the rings and start using them right away. I feel like, and I will probably repeat this for the next 6-7 years until the show ends, this show needs like several hours per season more to really appreciate everything, because like that's such a huge, just that is such a huge decision, and it's solved within like half of the first episode. So I get his point. I think it's an important one to show in throughout the story. I think it's going to be interesting to see how he comes back to changes his mind. But yeah, I get it. I think only at some points I feel like maybe they slightly overdid it. Like maybe the dialogue would have been like 5%, 10% better between him and Galadriel. But overall, I think it's fair enough.
Yeah,
exactly as the comment says.
Kyle, Kyle, if you don't mind, let's get that comment up from Otaku, because that's where where you are right now with this photo is where I want to go. I want to talk about the whites. What is your guys' impression of the way these, well, basically let's recap. Elrond doesn't listen to Galadriel, and he seems like maybe he should have in this particular context. They end up here. What did you guys think of the whites scene? First of all, did you like their representation on screen? First time we're getting to see like a really integral character, or whatever you want to call it, from the Fellowship. And then also lore-wise, is it all jiving? Is it making sense? Well, let's start with you on this one, James.
Yeah, so I think the portrayal of them was fantastic. I loved the visuals in this whole sequence. The action aspect of it, as well as the actual sort of production design around the costumes and everything, I thought was really fantastic. I mean, one of the big questions that people raise is should there be Barrow Wights at this point in the story? And the sort of surface answer is no. I mean, the Barrow Downs existed. This is where they are. They're definitely in the Barrow. We know from the name that they're definitely in the Barrow Downs from the Third Age. But those Barrow Downs existed at this point in time. So the fact that there are barrows is no problem. The thing that I think a lot of people have an issue with is, of course, we don't find out about the existence of Barrow Wights until well into the Third Age. And we're told specifically that the appearance of the Barrow Wights has to do with spirits that were sent by the Witch King of Angmar, who obviously doesn't exist yet in Rings of Power. Hopefully we will get to see him, whether it's Theo or someone else. So I think that's one of the issues that people have. That said, and I'll try to be a little defensive for the showrunners here, I don't necessarily have a problem with this idea of spirits being sent to inhabit the corpses in the barrows. I don't have a problem with that having been done before. Yes, the first we read about it in the books is the Witch King of Angmar in the middle of the Third Age, but that doesn't mean that Sauron couldn't have also done that at some point as well. So I have less of a lore issue with this than perhaps some others do, even though I acknowledge that there's no discussion in the books at all about there being Barrow Wights at this point. But certainly the portrayal of them I really loved. I thought this was visually stunning.
Yeah, I would agree as well. I think I really like the style, and I think there was a lot of interesting speculations about when we saw the photos, I think, in one of the articles 2 months ago or something, and the influence seems to be in real world terms like kind of like an Eastern one. And whether it is or isn't, it's interesting to compare like with the tribes of men that could have done this. Like, I think it is the fathers of the Edain, as they say, that were meant to have made this on their way to Beleriand all the way in the First Age. But I think it's also cool, potentially, it's possible, it could fit that maybe some of the Easterlings that show up in the First Age later on, it could also make sense that they did it. So like, I don't know what's the aesthetic influence, what's the reason for it in world, but they did look really cool. And I
have to say, so can I just say, for those of you who read Tintin, to me, the whites totally look like Raskar Kapak. If you know the Tintin book, the Seven Crystal Balls, Raskar Kapak, go look it up online if you don't know what I'm talking about. That's the image that I definitely got. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I did want to mention that for the Tintin fans.
All good. I'm not, but my girlfriend is, so I'll make sure to mention this to her. I'm very curious. Now, yeah, I want to say I really like James. What you
there he is.
There
he
we
is.
go.
There's Raskar Kapak. Thank you. the headwear in particular is spot on.
Yeah, it is actually totally. Yeah, so I would say,
Guys,
like, James, I think you said it well with the lore stuff. Like, absolutely, it could have been possible that someone at some point used the creatures such as the Barrow Wights. So I think lore-wise, I'm not gonna say it fits, but I'm gonna say it doesn't not fit.
Yep, exactly.
So I think it's a point, and they look really cool. The only thing, actually, okay, so two real comments. Lore, actually, Elrond, hell yeah. That was like, oh well, according to the lore, which is I
Yeah.
think I say this like at least once or twice per video as well. So I was like, aha. But also, the only thing I have an issue here, the biggest issue is I feel like they weren't completely sure what to do with it. So I kind of like the scene kind of ends maybe too quickly, like, which is a shame because they are an iconic group of creatures from Middle Earth. So I feel like it would be cool if we saw that more of them. But again, it could be also like due to the short time that we have. So, but yeah, overall, pretty cool. Why not? It doesn't not fit the lore, so I'm all for it.
Yeah,
I
I think
want
that
to
is.
add
Oh, please go ahead.
one more small thing because I saw it being discussed on TikTok. I don't remember by whom, but like Sauron taught the Witch King of Angmar what to do, like with a lot of stuff, terms of magic and stuff. So it does make sense for Sauron knowing how to do this thing, and also he's known as a necromancer at some point of Third Age's history, at least. So it fits Sauron. It doesn't fit Second Age, but it does fit Sauron. And exactly like what Strider said, it's not that it's not fitting. It's just that we haven't really know about it. Which again comes back to like the Second Age not being very well written through, as the First and Third Age are. There are not so many solid events. There are some things that change a lot throughout. So it's the age where you can easily put things that you want and creatively alter a lot of the law, in my opinion. So yeah, that was what I wanted to add.
It doesn't fit, but it doesn't not fit. Sort of like when you're between two sizes of jeans at Target. Let's move across to the other side of the world. We get an introduction to something that Tolkien introduces us to very early on in his written works, a different group of hobbit-like creatures, the Stores. Now, I don't think I need to point out to anyone here that they have been some of the characters that have had some of the most mixed reviews in terms of, or the Harfoots have been, in terms of their place in this show. And it seems like we are getting a little more of a direction in terms of sort of, building up I feel like we're starting to get pieces of where they're going with this. And I wanted to see what you guys thought about the introduction Stores, particularly the aspects of the fact that there are some physical characteristics, which Tolkien talks about as being slightly different than the Harfoots. James, what do you think? Before we get to the plot aspect, what do you think about the introduction of the Stores as sort of a another Hobbit clan, so to speak?
Yeah, well, I was really excited to see them. It obviously is something that Tolkien does talk about right at the start of Lord of the Rings. And on the whole topic of having halflings in this, I'm reminded of, Tolkien's concern with when trying to sell the Silmarillion was that the lack of hobbits was going to be a problem. And in some senses, I wonder if the showrunners were sort of worried about the same thing. We need to have people are going to expect hobbits, kind of thing, even though we may not yet have the payoff. So I'm really excited though to see the Stores, because Tolkien does spend the time to explain the three different types of halfling and their different histories and so on. It's interesting that you mentioned the characteristics that Tolkien, the physical characteristics that Tolkien describes. One of the things Tolkien says is that Stores are the only hobbits to have facial hair. And it's interesting, I don't think I saw much facial hair at all on any of these Stores. And it was sort of an interesting thing that they didn't pursue that. I don't know if anyone actually saw much facial hair on these Stores at all. But I thought it was fun. I thought it was a really interesting way of kind of filling in some of that backstory. We can get to the whole mythology of the Shire, the Sousa that gets talked about in a moment. That was a little odd and a bit Battlestar Galactica, I said on Rings of Power wrap up recently. That kind of mythological homeland that these multiple tribes are trying to seek out was very Battlestar Galactica. But I really loved seeing them, and it was fun getting a slightly different variation in music, a different variation in costume. It was a really nice opportunity for that sort of variety in contrast to the Harfoot. So from that point of view, it was I enjoyed it.
Now, Kyle, would you mind putting Veronica's comments on the screen about the stores by the Anduin and boats and all that good stuff?
So yeah,
Now,
I was just going to say on that point, yes, they eventually end up in the Anduin and had boats for sure. We don't know what they were doing in the Second Age if they existed at all. So all bets are off in that sense. They're not. Again, it comes back to that. It's not that it fit. It doesn't not it doesn't not fit. It's one of those sorts of things.
Yeah.
It's entirely possible. Yeah.
I'm curious. One of my theories was, because we heard at some point that we'll get Sturs, and Smeagol and Deagle are Sturs.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they, yeah, exactly. So as Veronica says here, they lived by Anduin and were like fisher folk and so on. So I one of my theories before this episode, the whole season, was okay. That's where we'll end up with the Sturs. I think I guess I got a bit more interested in the storyline now since we learned more about it. Though I'm not really sure. I like the fact that there's this, as James said, like this Battlestar Galactica prophesized land somewhere out there. Like how? What? I mean, I don't know. Maybe we get more explanation to it. Maybe it will make sense within the show. It's an interesting thing, I guess, to see. But overall, I think it's. I guess I'm curious about where the hobbits will end up. I do think that at least one part of them will end up somewhere close to Anduin. But I have to give a shout out to our friend from Fellowship of Fans, David. He had an absolutely amazing, one of the deepest of all the cuts ever that he caught. I'll send the Twitter thread in the chat, and maybe Kyle can, if you could maybe just put it like in the description or something. It was an amazing Easter egg that he caught. Sorry, just okay. So basically, one of the 4 rules or 3 rules this is the one. Don't call her the Gund, and I will extremely oversimplify it because it has several linguistic levels. It's really, really cool. Please go check it out if you like linguistics and Tolkien and all of those things.
Well, it's the Gund in Felagund.
Basically, yeah, Felagund. So, yeah, like Gund as in cave. It's word in one of these languages that denotes a cave. It was in the word Felagund, which is someone who skews the caves or something. And it's an amazing thing because it fits also with the region. Like he did a whole analysis of like how it works within the languages of Middle Earth relative to each other and given the geographical position and everything. And it's like these little nuggets, like who knows how many we missed. So again, thank you, David, for showing this to us, because it just really does show that there's so much going on, so many layers in the writing. Even if we have, and I personally have, I've talked about it many times, I have issues with many parts of the writing, but it's hard to deny that it's impossible, especially looking at this, to deny that people working on it are like not trying to like really go into like the deep layers of Tolkien's world and writing. And I just thought it was really, really cool. It's like one word, one mention, one quick, and you don't even have to blink. You're gonna miss it for sure, unless you're someone well read as David. It's just a really, really cool thing. So I just had to like take this detour and just give a huge props to him because I loved it. So please go check it out.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
But Otaku, everyone knows Falahides don't really exist. Just what did you think of the portrayal of the stores? sort of in terms of like their characterization and sort of the way they relate to in sort of the plot and elements of like how they related to the Harfoots and Nori and Poppy and everything.
So I think it's one of the stories that we have pay off way later on, actually, and it does make sense now. To be honest, when we first met Merrimack and the whole introduction scene, I got a bit out of it. We had a chat with Strider about that, the whole "who are you, I'm nobody" section. For me, it felt very strange because it reminded me a lot of Ulysses, Odysseus, I don't know how you will call him in your languages, with Cyclops. So coming from that background, I was like, what does this dialogue has to do here? And then it sort of went stupid, in my opinion, with the whole, oh, my mother calls me Merrimack. And then we have the whole program resolved. So there was really no point in the whole usage to do that. So yeah, that's why I was a bit off. When we got actually in the Sturs settlement, that's when I immersed back in Middle-earth, and it was really interesting to see how even Harfoots that are very close basically with Sturs, which from what we understand possibly came from Sturs because of the sort of lore that at least in the show, I mean, because of the lore with the Shujat and stuff like that, probably a party of Sturs left to go find the Shujat, and that party of Sturs ended up in the Harfoots. And the Harfoots are really confused about the way of living of Sturs and the whole culture. So it's really interesting to see how these two peoples that are very similar in our eyes have actually so many differences culturally that they don't really understand each other as similar as well, apart from their height. So it was quite interesting. I do want to see when it will pay off. In my opinion, it might not even be in the show. It might be a spin-off of the Hobbits finding the Shujat way later on. So who knows?
Just have to
That's a good answer.
If anybody knows of a reference anywhere in Tolkien that somebody refers to themselves as nobody, it would be cool if you could write that down, because it's been killing me. I feel like it just feels so familiar, but I cannot place it. So it could just be like a Ulysses reference, but yeah. So if you have any idea, please just type it in the comments.
So I just want to say one thing about the Harfoots and the Stores. It's the one thing that bothers me about I have a lot less problem, I think, than some people with the just bringing them in. And I've had this theory since we first learned that Tom Bombadil was going to be in this, that he was going to be the one that they sort of helps them find their way to the Shire and stuff. And it seems like maybe that's going to be coming true. And I think that's pretty cool, actually. But I just kind of resent how, I guess, juvenile they sort of portray them, and like overacting-y sort of vibe of the Hobbits in it. I felt like in Jackson's trilogy, we get this, yes, they're like quaint, but in like a charming, real way, not like an overdone way. And to me, that's the biggest problem, I think, with the halflings and the Rings of Power. But I want to move on to talking about the Stranger. And we're going to tie this in with the Stores real quick. The Stranger gets called a big old grand elf, and I don't want to talk about this or ask our panelists' opinion. I feel like everyone's been asked this and talked about 100 times. So I just want to make a poll. I want to know what people in the comments think. Are you team Gandalf or team Blue Wizard? And let's get that poll running, and let's see if Fellowship of Fans fandom ends up guessing right. And I guess we'll have the result.
Are you saying what they think? Are you asking what people think it will be, or what they wish it would be?
What people think it will be, not what they want, what they think
Yeah.
it will actually be.
Because I was going to say, even before the Grand Elf comment, there was also in previous episodes the fact that they refer to the staff or wand that he's looking for by the older Germanic name Gand.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think it, yeah. There's been, it still could be misdirection, but yeah.
It could be. But it's
By
I
the way-
so
going
wish
away.
it is. I so
Yeah.
wish it is, but at this point, let's
By the
be
way,
realistic.
I
I'm
just want to make a quick
real quick,
comment
Strider.
before we
I
move
just
to.
want to say,
Yeah.
super quick, Strider. As I've mentioned, my tech side is like kind of screwy today. So will someone just like let me know when the poll's up, because I can't really see. So put it in
it's
like
up.
the comment. Oh, it is. All right, dope. All right, cool. Strider, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
So also, I think a very interesting detail here. We have the leader of the community is female, which in Tolkien's world definitely is a thing that happens. There's several instances, of course, but it's particularly interesting with the Stewards because we know from a little mention from Smeagol's backstory
Mm-hmm.
that his community had a matriarch.
Yep.
So this is actually like full-on proper direct canon reference to the way the Steward community in particular works. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out because I'm sure someone had an issue with it somewhere. So this is absolutely 1000% the way Stewards work, and it was great. So yeah, let's carry on.
Hey, Kyle, would you mind putting up Veronica's comment about the Silmarillion from just about like a minute ago? Let's see. It says I'm reading the Silmarillion right now. Yeah. This is not a topic that we're going to get into right now. I just wanted this to put up there. If you haven't read the Silmarillion, here's your sign to go do that. Okay, good enough. Now we're going to we're going to go to The Strangers. Big story point for this episode. This is probably the thing I'm most excited to talk about from this episode, and especially because I think we might have kind of contrasting opinions from some of our panelists. Well, maybe we do, maybe not. We'll find out. Tommy B gets introduced this episode. Old Tom Bombadillo. And I'm really curious I've actually not talked with anyone since Thursday, so I have no idea what other people's takes on it. I'm excited to talk about it. V, let's start with you. What was your take on Tom Bombadil? And it's a two-parter. I want to hear, what is your take on him as like the portrayal of this like character that is sort of famously unique? And then also, what do you think of the way they're using him as far as what we can tell so far from the plot and his exchange with the stranger?
So Tommy B is one of these characters that I think they have a acquired taste when you are entering Tolkien. Like, you don't really love him at first, but he grows on you, in my opinion, and definitely the last few years, I love him. Like, I was so excited that he was gonna be in Rings of Power when it was first like leaked out, and I was so excited when the song came out because it was amazing. Bear McCreary really outdid himself, and with Rory Kinnear and Bear's wife, and I feel bad that I don't remember her name. Everyone was amazing, and the writing of the character as well was, in my opinion, really good. They did make him way too unhinged. Like, the stranger was so confused communicating with him. He was answering nonsense basically a lot of the time that didn't really make sense to him at first when he was first meeting him, and was bothered with his lilies. And I think the final touch was gaslighting the stranger that he didn't hear Goldberry talking with him earlier. So I really believe that the whole team did a really good job to bringing this character in life. And because it was a character that we haven't really seen in any adaptation before, they did not have that burden of someone like overshadowing overshadowing him, but they had that burden of doing it right because of how peculiar and difficult and weird this character is. So yes, I liked the portrayal overall, and I liked the sort of answers that they gave about what the hell is he doing in Rune. He basically came to inspect what happened to the forest, which is very Tom Bombadil-like. Like he says at some point that I had to see for myself, like the desert. So I remember, like, when we were first speculating, we're saying that maybe he was traveling through the big old forest and stuff like that, but that new information that the show brings, it's very interesting and fitting to the character. I don't know how fitting it is that he basically trains the wizards. I still have some reasons for that. I want to see where it could go with him and the stranger, but it's kind of interesting. Yeah, I will close on that.
Strider, what do you think about the aspect of him being outside what we, by at least the Third Age, know to sort of be his domain? You know, the Old Forest, the Barrow Downs. Do you think that sort of fits canonically in terms of how it's portrayed, that he would have, I guess, more reach at this point? One particular aspect is in Lord of the Rings, he is described as the master of the grounds that he still controls, but won't go outside them. Do you think that that makes him, are his grounds just bigger at this point and he is still the master of all these areas, or do the powers work differently, do you think, in this adaptation?
Again, it doesn't not fit, and even more so than the previous time I said that, because I don't know if it's Gandalf or Elrond, one of them says during the Council of Elrond in the books that I think it might
Elrond.
that he set certain boundaries for himself where he is the master and he doesn't want to. So they say now he set these boundaries, he doesn't want to cross outside of those. But so that implies that at some point he didn't, which then very clearly leaves the possibility for him to wander wherever Tom Bombadil will want to wander, because who's gonna stop him? No one. Even though it's a weird combination to have him all the way in Rune, it can work. Like theoretically, he could have been traveling who knows where. That's the thing with Tom Bombadil. He could have been all over the world if he wanted to, because and
Right.
he has all these nice references from the books, like, I was here before the first train and before the stars and all of that. I think it all works, and he very easily could be in Rune, even though absolutely I agree it's a very weird thing to see. But we see in the map later on, especially in this time, and especially before Numenorians start coming back to Middle Earth, it was way more forested. It was way more forested. And the fact that Tom wants to see what's up here, because it was all really nice before, it also fits. I like the portrayal. I think it's so far honestly pretty good. But I have to say, I've been saying this for this part when we come to Tom. My theory about I didn't think of it, but I think it might have been one of the Nerd of the Rings videos that got me to think about it. So explaining Tom, Ungoliant, nameless creatures, and all of that in one swoop. So the music of the Ainur, which is, for those who haven't read the Silmarillion, an angelic choir sang before the one god, and all of the destiny of the entire existence was sung in this song, and then it somehow becomes the world. It's just go read the Silmarillion; it's great. So basically, it is said that the all these Valar and Maiar, as they sang the song, none of them really knew what they were singing. Like, they didn't know all the things that this song will put into creation. And the way I like the explanation, it's like a kind of like a headcanon, but the way it fits, the way I would explain the nameless things and the Goliath and all these bad stuff that are not Maiar, like Balrogs, they were created through this discord that Melkor put into the song. And it is said like when Valar come into the earth, to like into the world in Arda, and they don't know all the things that they're going to see there, even though they were singing this song. But there's a lot of surprises. So I like the explanation that all this bad stuff comes from the discord that Melkor or Morgoth put into this song. And I like also the alternative where Tom Bombadil is explained in such a way that he is one of those mysterious things that were created by one of the Valar, for example, putting some of their notes, for example, Yavanna, into the song, and then him just becoming a thing, which also fits with if it actually fits really nicely with him being the oldest before the stars, before the first raindrop. Like if he existed from this primordial chaos that was this world in the very beginning of the song, it kind of fits with him fitting there. So yeah, it was maybe a longer explanation, but I'm quite proud that I don't think I made it too complicated. So anyway, yeah, I think Tom is really cool. I kind of like the pretty much actually the concept of him being a guide to the stranger. And I have to say, I think the way the stranger interacts with him, even though he's obviously like the child, the young protege in this situation, for me at least, it never came off as too much. He always feels like appropriately naive, but like never too much. I really like the acting of Daniel Weyman in this character so far. So yeah, I hope my whole comment wasn't too complicated.
No, we always love a good bit of backgrounds. I'll say that we have a couple comments that have come in about Tom maybe not being enough of a jolly fellow, and there's a funny one. His coat was dark gray and his boots were fallow or something. That was a pretty good joke. But I'll say that when you're doing an adaptation in something like this, this is just my 2 cents. I prefer a toned down version like this, where you see the hints of that underneath, but in a realistic way. Yeah, that was the one. Yeah. I prefer us getting like sort of hints of this, than something that feels overdone, which is again my complaint about the Harfoots. So I personally really like the characterization as you do, Strider. But let's go to you, James. I want to throw a couple elements of it to you. First off, what do you think of the use of the sort of old man, not a willow that we get? And the big one for me is Tom is always supposed to be aloof from this whole thing, right? The ring has no effect because he has no desire for it on him, etc. And instead, we get this element of Tom talking to the stranger about Sauron and his quest and all that stuff. I would love your take on that. Do you think there's a way that can be spun that sort of makes this jive with what Tolkien intended? And how would you like to see it, or do you think? Just give me your take on all that.
Yeah, so I'm gonna differ from some of our esteemed panelists on this matter. I was actually really disappointed with the portrayal of Tom Bombadil here. I think they're in an interesting situation here where they're clearly setting him up to be the stranger's Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? They want a mentor figure, and they've got a problem, right? So the stranger is an Istar. He's a Maiar. Who do you get to be a mentor to a Maiar? There aren't many people that are possibilities. And so they kind of, at that level, it makes sense that, okay, Tom Bombadil is one of the few people that could possibly act in that mentor role. And I will say it does, if it's Gandalf, then this does make it kind of the end of the Lord of the Rings, where Gandalf is excited to go back and spend some time with Tom Bombadil. That does make that really nice. It's kind of like, you'd imagine Gandalf wants to relive this moment. However, my biggest problem is that I don't feel like the portrayal captured the jovialness of Tom Bombadil enough at all. There were times when Tom Bombadil in the TV show seemed angry. There's one moment where he almost looked like he was going to fight the stranger, and he seemed cynical. I didn't mind the unhinged aspect of it. Tom Bombadil's supposed to be slightly unhinged, but he's supposed to be unhinged in a jolly way, in a sort of loving life kind of way that I did not pick up at all. Now, maybe it's that Tom Bombadil didn't start off like that and he became like that. I don't know, but it was really disappointing for me, especially given that I thought Círdan was so well done, especially in episode 1. I thought that Ben Daniels' portrayal of Círdan was so good. To your question though of Old Man Ironwood, that was another thing that I thought was a little bit too, oh, well, we've got to do the equivalent. Again, let's pick something that people didn't get to see in the Peter Jackson films and portray it so we could check that box. That didn't really work for me either. So all in all, this was one of the things that was disappointing for me about this episode, was the whole Tom Bombadil portrayal. Although, as I said, I think if you had to pick somebody that was going to be a mentor to an Istar, then you don't have many choices beyond one of the Valar or someone like Tom Bombadil.
Yeah, I totally agree about the tree in particular. It just felt so like that was to me like the definition of fan servicey. A very unnecessary element. If anything, give us a different thing that Tom can do that we haven't seen yet. Be inventive.
And it was so the name was so similar as well, like Old Man Ironwood.
Yeah.
Or something.
Do you think that we're gonna get a chance to see Goldberry at any point, or is it just gonna be an ethereal voice?
Let's talk about Goldberry, right? I guess not, because if we did, this would have been the way to do it. I also am curious in the chat, like, and I would like to hear all three of you as well. Like, does anybody have like what was the point of hearing her? And then like as you said, like Tom gets like the stranger, like, no, what? Are you here? I'm not alone because you're here. Are you here? Okay, to be fair, that little exchange was cool, but still, like, what's happened with Goldberry? I guess they want to just give like a little Easter egg, like, I don't know, were they on Skype or something, and then she was just like singing along.
That's what I was gonna say, like astral projection.
With the Windle over there, or not from Windle, but like the forest part. Also, that was the one thing. So they do these cool little things like the Gund that we discussed earlier, and then they say that that's not what they called me in Vitivindel, and I think that Vitivindel is specifically the river, not the area. But I guess we could have canon it as maybe it was known by the river at the time. A lot of weird little things going on in this whole scene. So I can see, like, I understand why it can be a bit like disappointing. I like the performance, but like the stuff around it is like,
Yeah, I'm gonna just give one more thought. I don't think I'm belaboring this too much. As I said, I didn't mind his tone so much, but it was when he started to get to this element where, like, politicizing Tom, I guess, so to speak. Like, he's supposed to be sort of apart from all of this in a way, right? And I think that was, for me, when that element of what you maybe called cynical seemed to come out. It wasn't, I don't think I read it quite like that, so much as he's not supposed to really care, it's like, or take sides, really, that was the only, I was not disappointed with the portrayal, but maybe the direction they seem to be going with the character's arc, so to speak. I don't know, or the character's plot, anyway. Would anyone like to throw any other Tom stuff in before we move to the next piece of all of this? I think we got like two things left.
I think the only thing I want to like add on top of that, because yes, he seems like taking part, and I would expect to where the story wants to go that he will take more part in it. Like when reading him, I always thought of him like the ends, but because he was so far away from Sauron, he didn't even see how important it was for him to take part in it to protect nature, which was his home. Because in my mind, at least, I am always reading Tom as this guy that not only takes care of nature, but is part of nature. He is nature in all of his sense. So with the explanation given by the show that he went there to check how Rune became a desert and the trees and all that, and given that he hinted that he knows the other wizard and basically he sort of betrayed him, maybe we will see a sort of arc for him from going to like a bit of like being a bit involved with stuff in Middle Earth and then not being involved at all and just resting in the old woods near the Shire. So I think that they will get that direction with him, so we will see more of him in season 2 at least. I don't know if we will see him in season 3, then I would expect Beck to be with Goldberry. But for season 2, I don't think we will see Goldberry.
Really quick, bad host, Gregory, bad. Strider just put in the comments asking for you guys to like this. Please do that. It's super helpful to us. And if you haven't, subscribe, of course. If that's it, let's move on to the next sort of big I mean, we got like just thing after thing in this episode in terms of like big Tolkien stuff that we've wanted to see for a long, long time. The next big one are Entwives. Entwives. I mean, that's something that like, you know, I bet if you had asked any of us before the show came out, that would have been one of the coolest things that we could have imagined seeing come to life in a Tolkien adaptation. Strider, what was your sort of initial impression? Like, what do you think? We get an Ent and his wife. And what did you think of sort of the portrayal? They're very similar to the Peter Jackson adaptations in many ways. What do you think about just surface level thoughts or your first thoughts? What do you think of where they're going with this and how it's portrayed?
I enjoyed it. The one thing that was always weird to me in this whole thing is like, where are we? Because from what we know, Entwives were mostly in these gardens that are like north from Mordor, and this is like way down south, down the river towards Pelargir, which is like quite in the south, like after Anduin curves towards the west. So the sense of geography is the thing that's kind of bothering me this storyline. Like actually quite a bit. Like it's just so fast from like basically Tirharad is here, Kiritungul is here, and Pelargir is like over here. So he goes from here to Kiritungul and then goes here. It's just like geography, and Entwives are like up here. So it's like a whole little thing. But still, portrayal, I think it was pretty cool. I to see Ents angry that's one of the most powerful things in the books. This anger of nature. It was really, really cool. I love the scene with smacking Astrid so hard that she flies away 10 meters or like 6, 7, 8 meters, smacks into a rock, and it's all right. It's like one of those classic heroes don't die from normal things, from normal damage. But this anger of nature, I really like that. And Arondir keeps being quite an elvish elf so far. I think Ismail Cordova has been doing Cruz Cordova has been doing a really good job, and I think he's getting better and better as Arondir. This moment with him,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, forgive me. And then she asked him, "Did you do this?" And he's like, and we saw this wonderful moment, one of the most Tolkien moments from season 1. It's just really, really, really lovely. And the stuff that they're doing with Arondir he had some of the most Tolkien moments so far in the show, and this was just beautiful. Like this whole interaction with her and the design. I just really liked it, and the whole trail of destruction by the army and all of that. I think that was pretty cool. Yeah, one of the best moments of the show so far, including season 1.
Hey, Kyle, would you mind throwing up Sarah's first comment, the one that's responding to Otaku? I have mixed feelings about the portrayal. I just want to put this up because I feel like this is the first time I've ever seen someone say something that I have agreed with since the Peter Jackson trilogy about the Ents. I always felt like that portrayal was a little too tree-ish compared to how I felt about them in the books. And I just want to spotlight that because I feel like I'm the only person who thinks that normally. And people always love the Ents. But James, let's come back to the episode at hand. How did you feel about sort of the portrayal and what we're getting here in terms of something we haven't seen before and love story, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, it was wonderful seeing the Entwives. That to me was one of the boxes that I was very glad to have checked. But I also, just Strider brought this up, that tension when Winterbloom says, "Hast thou ever touched axe to wooded life?" that was for me the most beautiful part of this episode. Was just when I just felt so gutted for Arondir. I almost wanted to jump into the screen and explain, no, there's a reason why he did it. And just that whole thing was, I just love that. And to what Strider said, it's one of the most Tolkien aspects of this. And I'm really glad that they brought that. Yeah. I mean, it was wonderful to see in the first season, but I'm glad it came up again to really reinforce that nature. And the fact that the Entwife is so, I mean, it's such a big deal to her that have you ever, it's like, if you've ever put an axe to wooded life, then it's, then I'm going to kill you kind of thing. Yeah. But then the forgiveness aspects comes into it as well. The pity. So that was probably the highlight of the episode for me, was that particular interaction.
Yeah, you know what? I think it's worth highlighting that as well, because in a show where maybe good writing has sometimes been a dearth, it's worth pointing out that is a really great moment of writing.
When it's good, it's amazing. There's been some amazing. Yeah. I mean, I've been critical of certain parts of the writing, but when they get it, they really do a good job.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The one thing that I kind of wanted to ask you, what do you think about this? I feel like the way that they responded to these Ents kind of seemed a little strange to me. Like in Lord of the Rings, right, we get this wonderful reaction of Pippin and Merry when they're like realize they're being carried by a walking, talking tree. And here it seems like people just kind of accept it like real quick. My question here, do you think Ents are more common in the Second Age? Like, are they all little, because 4,000 years later have Ents basically dropped off the scene, but here people are a lot more familiar with them? Or what's your take?
I think they're more widespread, and I don't know if they're going to touch on this, but one of the things that happened in the Second Age was a lot of deforestation. And so depending on where we are in the Second Age and whether they're going to portray sort of the Númenórean cutting down trees for their boats and stuff, I suspect they're not. We're not going to see that. But in the books, it was a really big deal, the deforestation of this whole region, which had an impact on the Ents. So I like this idea that Ents were a little more widespread. Certainly you imagine Arondir would be familiar with Ents. The others, maybe not. They should have probably been a little more shocked.
Yeah.
V, what was your take on the Ents and this sort of everything that we're getting here, and maybe what do you think about the way that Isildur fits into all of this? Like, should he be aware of Ents as a Númenórean?
Yeah, so I think the one thing actually that I was going to mention, like, I would expect at least Isildur to be surprised, because I don't think there are Ents in Númenor. Like, there is no mention of them. We have mentions of dancing birds, but no Ents. So it would be something that it would be mentioned, I suppose. So Isildur probably, maybe he could have had legends of them. I imagine like folklore, especially being part of the faithful, who are the ones that have closer to them, like Middle-earth and elves and all the stories and the law. So I don't really remember his reaction, but Arender knew exactly how to handle an Ent and how to talk to them. So he was definitely like knowledgeable and had interacted with an Ent before. Also, what I loved about the Endwife is the pure female anger and that she portrayed on scene, and the voice and everything like came up together so good, because we don't really see that. We have more of a crying sort of reaction when we see like women of any sort on screen, talking about basically what she views the trees as her children. So that reaction, so much anger and the female rage, just did for me so much. I really loved that. But at the same time, forgiving, because that's in the nature as well, like taking back and forgiving, and the ends as well, like not. Although I would say she says like forgiveness takes an age, so it's probably not exactly that. Like you will get punished for some reason, like until we are ready to basically forgive you, but it's the ends as well. Everything goes slower. So yeah, they're interesting, very good. A lot of questions about who knew ends existed and who not. I expect like the people actually being prisoners of the ends, like the Southlanders, basically probably would have met an Ent in their forests, because they have rumors like if you go inside the forest, like you don't really get out and stuff like that. So they're not that surprised, probably more afraid, I would say. Yeah.
And
I
that does
have a-
give credence.
I have a
That does give
comment.
credence. Sure. Let me. I was just say that does give credence to the danger that we see from the Ents here as well, right? Like they're dangerous dangerous creatures for sure. Strutter, go ahead.
So, first of all, quick side comment. I realized during this episode, Tom has an interesting role that we saw from an Ent in the Lord of the Rings, as he is this mentor figure to two wizards, one of which kind of betrays the ideals that Tom, or in that case Treebeard, was teaching to Saruman. So I think that's an interesting parallel, that Tom kind of has this role that Treebeard has in the Lord of the Rings. But I was going to say, so this whole idea of deforestation and the fact that so let's not forget, we saw a brief shot of ants, and not just any ants. It felt like an ant and an antwife and I don't know what's the word in English, entling,
Intling.
the
Intling,
child
yeah.
elf. We saw them in season 1, and now we see them here. We interact with them, and we see all this forested area. And I was thinking like how all this could connect, and I'm wondering, will the great so Numenor, as they kind of descend into everything that they descend into, which is a lot. One of the things that happens is, of course, this whole deforestation, and due to the time compression, due to a lot of things in the show, we will not see all this tyrannical treatment of Middle Earth and so on, probably. So I wonder, like, if the big thing that will show us how much they fell is when Pharazôn goes, okay, I'm gonna make this fleet, I'm gonna go over there and do all this stuff, but I need trees. And is this the big thing that Numenor will do? They will just go on and destroy all this. And I wonder if this then can fit with Isildur's character arc, maybe, and enhance his struggle against the Kingsmen, as he now met Ents and Entwife. It might like reinforce all of that. So I think we might end up seeing actually deforestation in some way. I mean, it's just a theory.
I think they're going to have to do it. That yeah. I mean, I made a comment when I found out about the time compression 2.5 years ago, whenever it was. That was one of the comments that I made: is how are they going to compress? Because in in the books, it's a much more gradual process, right? That
Mhm.
they have a couple of military successes, they get a thirst for power, they start then dominating Middle-earth more. This is Numenorians I'm talking about. And then as they dominate more, they start to get wealthier. They start becoming obsessed with wealth. And then when they get more wealth, they start getting obsessed with long life. So there's this sequence in the books that they have to basically all do under Pharazôn in one go. And I agree with you and really hope that they do portray, I think that notion that Pharazôn's we're going to see Pharazôn basically saying, tear all the forests down, rip the trees from the roots like Saruman. I'm hoping we do get to see that, because they've got to build up enough justification for the fall of Numenor, right? I mean, they've got to show us why Numenor deserves to be at the bottom of an ocean. And I think you're right that this is one way they could definitely do that. And
it also ties in with the fall of Ents as well. So it shows us,
exactly, the combination.
They killed it's the whole,
yeah.
I love that we're thinking ahead to that sort of stuff. It's a really interesting theory, and it would definitely I think it would really help sort of pull a lot of these elements together. Guys, we are almost an hour and a half in, so let's talk one more thing and then wrap up. Let's come back to what we talked about at the beginning. James had a particular comment that he wanted to cover, and that is what Adar says to Galadriel. We are getting in this episode sort of a reunification of maybe the most interesting relationship in season 1, and it seems like they're not quite done with each other yet. James, what are you saying here?
Well, this comes back to that conversation we had. They're doing a lot of sort of displacement of dialogue from the books in various places. We saw that particularly with Tom, but we've seen it in other places too. And the Peter Jackson films did this. It happens a lot where you take words that one character says and you put them on the lips of another in a completely different context. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. As Strider says, sometimes they land it, sometimes they don't. But one case that I really loved is, when Adar greets Galadriel at the very end, he uses, of course, that Quenya greeting that we read in the books from Gildor in the Woody End. Well, Frodo says it to Gildor in Glorian in the Woody End, the Ellen Silo Menti Elvo, and the fact that he says that, just that standard Elvish greeting, is just so perfect for this moment. It's kind of like, what else would he say? But to give that Elvish greeting, and then he refers to Galadriel by her Quenya name as well, which is I just thought that was a brilliant touch of it's sort of saying fancy seeing you here, but just said in the most Elvish way possible, which coming from Adar is just I thought there was a beautiful irony to that as well.
Wonderful.
And I totally agree. It couldn't have said it better. I mean, and to bring in something that really is a special moment in the books that we don't get because we lose so much of the other elves outside of Rivendell and Legolas and the Jackson trilogy. I think it was really deftly done. Strider, V, do you guys have anything to add about that?
Yeah. So actually, just one thing, since you mentioned Legolas, I just thought of that. We also get kind of like a confirmation that Arondir is actually one of the Green Elves.
Yes, that's true.
That was a thing that was mentioned. But I was going to say, I mean, James covered it perfectly, but there's one added little nugget there also, that this name was actually given to Galadriel by her husband.
Right.
It means the one crowned with garland, which is like, okay, is this just like
how does he know that?
Little Easter egg, or?
Well, the actual name that Celeborn gives her is in a different language, is in Teleran, a different language, and Adar speaks the Quenya version of that. But yeah, it's led to a lot of speculation. How did Adar know that was her name? Did he find out from Celeborn? Does that mean he knows where Celeborn is? Yeah.
I will be the killjoy of that, and I will say he just translated it.
Yeah, that's entirely possible, because she is wearing her hair at that moment. She is wearing her hair in the very way that.
No, I don't mean that exactly, but he translated Galadriel because
That's true.
Galadriel is the
Galadriel
translation of
is the
Altariel,
Sindarin, yeah, that's true.
Alatariel, and all. So he
That's
just
possible.
translated it because he spoke in Quenya, and
Yeah.
they showed him
Yeah,
speaking in Quenya. So I don't think it's that deep.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think it's necessarily an indication.
I want
that
to
he
see
knows who
Celeborn in
Celeborn
this
is.
season as well. If they, but they won't give it to us. But I'm not that diligent. Like, translation exists. I think they were able to do that, given how many different languages most of the elves spoke.
But yeah, I mean, that was not my main point. My main point was that the just using that Elvish greeting.
Elvish greeting was brilliant.
Just fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was, because it's always, I always felt, for obvious reasons, it's got out. Even in the extended edition, it's extremely simplified. They're just the elves walking by.
Yeah.
But Gildor is such a cool, interesting character, especially with all his background meta stuff of who this character was supposed to be. And just like hear that greeting was wonderful.
Yeah, and Tolkien said in the letter that I mean, he was kidding, but he was exaggerating. But he said in one of his letters to Christopher, I think it was, that the soul that he created this whole world just to have a world where the greeting would be Ellen Silla Lamentamenti Elvo. Right? He said that he and it's that exact greeting. So it's again wonderful to see in the show.
And to hear as
yes.
well, because it's just like
yeah.
Guys, we're gonna have to wrap up, so let's end with what our sort of has become our tradition a little bit, and we're gonna do with start with your least favorite thing, then your most favorite thing, and then what you're looking forward to seeing next week. And V, let's start with you.
So I think my least favorite thing was the whole worm sequence with Astrid and Isildur and Arondir, mainly because I forgot about it until today. So it didn't really stuck out to me that much as the rest of the episode. And as my favorite, I will, of course, put my precious little Tom Bombadil and all the Easter eggs that this scene has, because we haven't even talked about Irwin, the goat, and we already talked so much. So yeah, and what I want to see next week, more of Elrond and Galadriel bickering to each other, because it's my highlight. I miss the episodes from season 1 when Elrond and Durin were bickering to each other. Now it's Elrond and Galadriel, so that's my highlight, and I want to see more of that next week.
Awesome. I'll just go second, get myself out of the way. My least favorite is probably just going to come back to the tone of the Harfoots and the stores. Maybe it's because I'm an actor. It drives me crazy. My favorite, I know people. There's clearly a divided group here on this, but just getting to see Tom Bombadil, one of my favorite characters in the books. I know that this has its issues, but just getting to see that character on screen was really cool for me. And what I'm most looking forward to, I'm really looking forward to getting back to Celebrimbor and Anatar, because I think that where we left that in season 3 was really riveting, and I'm really stoked to see how that unfolds. Strider, let's go to you.
So the least favorite, it's kind of escaping me. I guess I could say maybe this. It's weird, but I didn't really dislike active dislike things in this episode. There were things that I think could have been done better, should have been done better. I guess this scene with this, maybe that line, there are creatures in deep places of the world or whatever. It's just like, you could have done that either a bit more subtly or just not having done that at all and like saying something else. What I liked is a lot. I really love this episode because it just scratches like 5 itches I've had from the movies that we didn't get. Like we get ants, we get ant vibes. We see Tom. There's a lot of cool little things going on. we see stewards, and while I'm still very much jury's still out on everything hobbits in this show, except the stranger. I think that it was cool, like that they had a matriarch, for example, because again, it's like a really cool direct thing from the books, and it's cool to see that. This I cannot pronounce it. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but this other name for Shire, it is a Tolkien
Suzak.
name, and it's really, yeah, exactly. It's cool that we saw that. But the main thing is the episode is called The Eldest, and we get to see like these old creatures. We see ants. We see we see an ant. We see an antwice. We see Tom, who is the oldest of the all, the oldest and eldest and fatherless. Also, his goat is called the oldest goat, Yarvain. That's actually what we mentioned didn't mention. So his name is in Elvish, oldest and fatherless, which is Yarvain Ben Adar, the eldest and without father, and that's how he called his goat, the eldest. I guess it's the oldest goat he has. So there was a lot of these thematic stuff. I just really enjoyed it. I feel like this show needed episodes like this that just give us like depth to the world, show us characters. We saw Barrow-wights, right? It's just a lot of cool talking stuff that we haven't seen before, or we haven't seen enough in this show, and some of them in the movies. And I was just like really happy, honestly. This might be my favorite episode of the show, honestly, so far, which is a wild statement to make, I guess. But here we are. It was really cool. Also, the songs were wonderful. Well done to everybody who sang them, the singer and the artist who actually sang the song on the album. Just really, really cool stuff. And Bear's wife, who did her Goldberry bit. Just a lot of really nice talking stuff. So I guess stuff connected to the title is what I really liked. And I'm looking forward to more of this, I guess, in the next episode.
We're going to go to James in just a sec, but everybody, while we're still here, put what your favorite and least favorite things are in the comments and what you guys are looking forward to. Let's hear from you guys as we're going as well. And James, give us your least favorite, your favorite, what you're looking forward to, and then give us a nice solid plug of your socials so that people can follow you at the end.
Okay, wonderful. So I won't say my least favorite's Tom Bombadil because I'll get hate mail. I think the worm scene was my least favorite. My favorite thing was probably that line that Adar says to Galadriel at the end, although also the Arondir with the Ents as well is right up there. In terms of what I'm most looking forward to seeing in hopefully the next episode, I think it's going to be really interesting to see the conflict between King Durin and Prince Durin play out in relation to the rings, especially as there seems to be a bit of a reversal now about who wants the rings out of the Dwarven ring out of those two. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that, because all of the scenes with the dwarves have been excellent, in my opinion. In terms of my socials, I'm pretty much Digital Tolkien on most channels: Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram. So Digital Tolkien, and of course digitaltolkien.com is the website where you can get links to all of the different projects. Oh, and a YouTube channel as well, Digital Tolkien on YouTube. I do a monthly update, as well as a bunch of other videos. So please subscribe and check out all the other stuff. And thank you very much for having me on the show as well.
Thank you so much for being here. And a big shout out to Kyle for doing the back end. He crushed it today. Thanks everybody for tuning in. It was great to see you. Great comments. And we will see you next Sunday.
Bye.